does what he's told. And the answer to your question is yes. The chances of war with Iran and Israel and the United States is about 85%. And I don't think it's too far off. It could be, in the next couple of months, because everything is lined up. The new excuse is that Russia is introducing uranium rods so that they can get their nuclear reactor going, and Israel wants to attack and do away with that. The problem that Israel has is that the Russians have just set up new missiles which are in the path of Israeli aggression, and if Israel were to attack Iran, they would lose a lot of aircraft because these missiles are extremely effective. And I think an attack on Iran would bring in Russia and China, and that's what the static is, and that's why we're having trouble hearing each other. It began as we went on the air, unfortunately, and I've had about 25 of them in the last 30 days because I live in the third world, and so we'll have to put up with it.
I didn't know you. Obviously, where are you at now?
Yeah, I'm in South America.
I'm listening. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Wow, I didn't know that. All that time I did not know that. So let's talk about the interlocking of the economies of the world. And talk to me about individual domino effect. I don't know if I'm really asking the question right, but I know that the United States is interlocked with everybody else in the free trade and all that other stuff. But talk to me about how interlocking are all the economies of the world. How dependent. So if one sneezes, the other one, and then related to the coming collapse that could be worldwide.
Well, what happens in the United States is reflected everywhere. They have the largest military in the world, and as we all know, they have operations going in many places. And whatever they do affects the entire world, to some extent at least. And it's been that way for many, many years. And they've used this industrial military complex to cower people throughout the world into submission so that they will do what the United States tells them to do. I mean, I've talked to heads of countries and ex-heads of countries who told me, look, they said, the United States said to us, if you do that, we'll destroy you.
Wow. Wow.
And it doesn't have to be military. I mean, they can cut off their phones and their internet and their banking and all kinds of other things that would make life extraordinarily difficult for people in other nations.
Yeah. How's Europe doing, Davey, endeavor to stay out of financial ruin?
Well, Europe is doing dreadfully, but not as bad as the United States and not as bad as England. England is in worse shape than the U.S. And I've done a number of radio and television programs and interviews with top newspapers in Greece, as an example, and now the BBC and Deutsche Welle and French International as well. And there's a big problem, and that problem has existed for many years. It's just not something new. The case of Greece and Italy in particular being semi-solvent for perhaps 25 or 30 years, but yet we're still invited to be members of the European Union. which was ridiculous. For those of you who don't know, there are 27 countries in the European Union, and 16 of those countries are part of the Eurozone that use the euro. And so with that said, Greece and Italy should have never been accepted in the euro in the first place. I mean, I wrote about it 12 years ago. And so this was nothing new. And then they had, when they started, and still, in the Eurozone, they have one interest rate that fits all. And that's the most insane thing I've ever heard. And I wrote that when they finalized the Maastricht Treaty 12 years ago. But nobody was listening. And so what happened was that those low interest rates, relatively speaking, to some nations, such as Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Greece, and Italy, allowed these countries to get into deep trouble. And we're seeing it now. And so the European Union and Eurozone members have said, look, we're going to come up with $1 trillion and we're going to fund you and everything's going to be okay. Well, it's not going to be okay, because the real figure is $3 trillion. And everybody looks at the problem, and the people who are in the middle of the problematic part of it, they don't look at all the lenders. And the lenders are countries, such as Germany and France and others, and banks. Now, the banks knew they should have never, ever lent money to these countries in the first place, which they created out of thin air.
Yes.
And now they want the Greeks and the others to pay the money back, and I told them, don't do it. Because this is money that never existed.
Yes.
And I said, leave the Eurozone and go back to the drachma and cut costs 30%, and you only have a depression for 4 or 5 years, and you'll be off and running.
Yes.
And if you accede to the demands of the Eurozone and the IMF and the European Union, you'll be in depression for the next 30 to 50 years.
Yeah.
But, you know, Papandreou, who's the PM of the country, he doesn't want to hear that, because he's a Bilderberger and a member of the Illuminati, just like all the leadership is in Europe.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, with all this debt of these countries, now factor in derivatives and paint a picture of how it looks with these highly sophisticated sharp gambling instruments, plus all the debt that these countries are intertwined. Well, go ahead and answer that question if you can.
Well, first of all, derivatives are insurance. You buy a bond and you only want the yield. You don't want the fluctuation of the bond. So you buy a derivative, an insurance policy, to protect you against the bond going up and down. And let's say the yield is 3.5%. So you give up 0.5% of the yield in dollars or some currency to insure you against the fluctuation in the bond. And at the same time, you get your 3% net, and you live happily ever after. The problem is that there are 1.4 quadrillion dollars worth of derivatives out there. Now, what is a quadrillion? It's the next step beyond a trillion. Most people don't know that. That's why I tell them. And so that's more money than there is in the entire world. And these derivatives are written very often with no collateralization. You saw what happened to Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, and AIG. They were doing that.
Wow. That's great.
And so it's a bomb that's yet to happen. And when it does, watch out below.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. Is the real estate market still factor into this stuff too?
Does the what?
Is the real estate market in the United States, is they still factoring into this?
Sure.
Wow.
Absolutely. We got everybody out of the real estate market in '05 and '06 at the latest, and everybody who was a subscriber was saved, and all of the people who listened, which are in the millions. So we helped a lot of people on that count. But the real estate market has not hit bottom. It's going to get down another 20 to 30% between now and 2015. Number one, all of the bad loans and the foreclosures are out there, but also we have to consider all the loans that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, and FHA have made over the past 2 years that now have to be reset or renewed. Half of them are going to fall out because they should have been never making those subprime loans all over again like they allowed the banks to do before, just to keep the real estate market from collapsing further.
Wow.
So it's not going to go away for a long time. Commercial real estate is a dead duck. It'll get down 70 to 80%.
That's crazy. Wow. What is the Hindenburg-Ullman indicator? Do you know what that is?
Oh, the Hindenburg?
Yeah, the Hindenburg-Ullman indicator.
Let me tell you something. All of these indicators are mumbo-jumbo. And it's just like when you have the United States government interfering in every market